Operation Barbarossa, Hitler's strategic mistake. June 22, 1941, 4 o'clock in the morning. German aircraft crossed the border into the Soviet Union. No declaration of war, no warning. The largest military operation in human history begins. Its code name, Operation Barbarossa. What was meant to be a lightning-fast blitzkrieg would soon turn into a strategic disaster. Hitler was convinced the USSR would collapse in a matter of weeks. He famously said, "Just kick in the door and the whole rotten structure will come crashing down." He saw Stalin as weak and the Red Army as nothing more than a disorganized mass. The plan was clear. 3 army groups, North, Center, and South, would crush the Soviet forces near the western frontier, then push forward to Leningrad, Moscow, and Kiev. The goal? To strangle the Soviet Union in one swift strike, destroy the state before it could fight back. But that's where the first major miscalculation began. Hitler underestimated 2 things, distance and time. The Soviet Union was vast, far larger than even Germany's top generals expected, and the roads not just long, but often impassable. Dust in the summer, mud in the fall, ice in the winter, all of it deadly for wheels, engines, and tracks. Think about it. In the first 3 months, the Wehrmacht advanced over 800 kilometers, but each week their logistical burden grew heavier. Ammunition, fuel, food, all lagged behind. Railroads had to be rebuilt to match German gauges, and retreating Soviet troops left nothing behind. Supply depots destroyed, fields burned, bridges blown up. Yes, the early victories were impressive. Minsk fell in just 6 days. Smolensk, after a month. By September 1st, German forces were only 300 kilometers from Moscow. But instead of striking straight for the capital, Hitler hesitated. He ordered Army Group Center to turn south, toward Kiev. This redirection came at a cost. Time, precious time. Instead of aiming for the heart, Germany struck at the flank. October 1941. As German tanks finally turned back toward Moscow, autumn had arrived, and with it, the infamous Rasputitsa. Roads turned to swamps, vehicles bogged down in mud, infantry exhausted, and the army stretched thin. Meanwhile, the Soviets mobilized. Hundreds of thousands of fresh troops were called up. By August alone, more than 5 million men. Over 1,500 factories were evacuated to the east, and perhaps most critically, a message came from Tokyo. From Soviet spy Richard Sorge, Japan would not attack from the east, which meant one thing: the elite Siberian divisions could be transferred to defend Moscow. All of this was the result of one mistake, a mistake Hitler refused to see. He believed victory was already his, but the vastness, the weather, and the enemy's will to resist would cost the Third Reich everything. November 1941. Temperatures dropped below freezing. The first frosts hit the German army hard. Tank engines freeze, fuel lines crack open, and infantry. They still wear summer uniforms. Victory was supposed to come in October. Even their weapons began to fail. The MG-34, rifles, machine guns. Grease turned to glue in the cold. Triggers froze. German engineering had never been tested like this. Operation Barbarossa was turning into a fight for survival. Outside Moscow, German troops now met fierce resistance. Fresh Siberian divisions arrived, well-trained, fully equipped. They were winter soldiers, clad in heavy coats and fur hats. Moving swiftly on skis, they struck fast and hard. A counteroffensive began near Klin, Istra, Krasnaya Polyana, and for the first time, the Germans were pushed back. Hitler refused to believe what was happening. He ordered no retreat, not one step back. This was the beginning of Wehrmacht's winter hell. Soldiers huddled around burning barrels. Boots froze to feet. Trenches turned to ice. Frostbite killed more men than Soviet bullets, and supplies were collapsing. This wasn't just a setback. It was the first tactical fracture of the German army, a psychological one. The myth of invincibility shattered. So what went wrong? Hitler made the ultimate mistake. He took command, personally. He stopped trusting his generals. He placed ideology above logistics. He gave orders to attack when defense was needed. He refused to mobilize Germany's economy, and he believed the war would be short. By December, the front was collapsing. The Red Army counterattacked. Moscow held. The German advance stalled. Commanders like Guderian, Bock, and Brauchitsch begged to pull back. Hitler said no. He fired them all and assumed direct control. This was the start of his military isolation. Historians would later say Barbarossa was not lost in December. It was lost that summer, when Hitler turned from Moscow to Kyiv, when he ignored his generals, when he underestimated the Soviet people and the Russian land. The Soviet Union wasn't weak. It was vast, relentless, and willing to suffer. By spring 1942, everything had changed. Germany was stuck in a war it was never prepared for. Operation Barbarossa wasn't just a mistake. It was an overestimation of self and a complete misunderstanding of the power of a foreign land. Sometimes strategy isn't enough. When will is stronger than steel, when frost is deadlier than fire, when technology falls to resolve. Hitler planned to destroy the USSR in 6 weeks. 4 years later, the USSR took Berlin. Sub-battles, the untold stories of Greyhound. This video is intended solely for educational and documentary purposes. It contains no ideological or political messaging. The ocean holds many secrets. Some sank beneath the waves, others never surfaced at all. This is the story of a war fought in silence, of ships that vanished without a trace, of men who listened for death in the hum of sonar and answered with depth charges. This is the untold story of the Atlantic War, the greyhounds, and the wolves they hunted. It began with darkness, not just nightfall, but confusion. 1942. The Battle of the Atlantic was in full swing. Convoys crossed from America to Britain, bringing food, oil, weapons, hope. They were lifelines, and the U-boats knew it. The Germans called it the Tonnage War. Sink enough cargo, and the Allies would starve. They unleashed their submarines in packs, wolves of steel, prowling the North Atlantic in silence. And it worked. By the end of that year, Allied shipping losses hit record levels. Merchant ships were sinking faster than they could be built. Convoys were organized, groups of 30, 40, sometimes 70 ships, all moving together. Their only protection, lightly armed destroyers and corvettes, small, fast, and never enough. Enter the Greyhound, a destroyer escort driven by discipline and instinct. Its mission: protect the convoy at all costs, detect threats, track periscopes, fight off an enemy it couldn't see. The men aboard lived with constant pressure, long hours, frozen hands, no sleep, eyes locked on sonar screens, ears tuned for anything unusual, a faint ping, a sudden silence, a missed heartbeat. The U-boat captains knew this too. Men like Otto Kretschmer, Günther Prien, Joachim Schepke, legends of the deep. They struck at night, surfaced between the ships, fired torpedoes point blank, then disappeared beneath the waves. One U-boat could sink 3, 4, even 5 ships in a single patrol, and then radio home. The sea is clean. But the sea never stayed clean for long. The Allies adapted. They deployed ASDIC, an early form of sonar. They mounted HF/DF gear, Huff Duff, to intercept U-boat communications. They built escort carriers. They patrolled the skies. Still, it wasn't enough. February 1943. A distress signal reaches the destroyer, USS Campbell. A freighter had spotted something, shadow in the mist. The sonar couldn't confirm, but the captain made a choice. He ordered the drop. A pattern of depth charges fell into the sea. Moments later, a plume. A U-boat surfaced in agony. U-606, its hull cracked, struggling to dive. Campbell's gunners didn't wait. They opened fire. The sea boiled. The boat disappeared for good. That was one kill, but there were hundreds more. U-boats were clever. They dropped decoys, broadcast false signals, lured escorts away from convoys. Sometimes they hunted in daylight. Other times they waited offshore. April 1942. U-123 surfaced just miles from the coast of Georgia. In plain view, it sank 2 American ships. No warning, no mercy. For the first time, war touched American soil. It was a wake-up call. No one was safe. From that point on, the U.S. Navy mobilized with fury. Hundreds of new ships, thousands of sailors. Training accelerated. Technology rushed to the front. They built destroyer escorts like the USS England that would go on to sink 6 submarines in 12 days, a record never broken. But even legends bled. Escort ships were not invincible. One well-placed torpedo, and they split in half. Many ships sank with no distress call, no survivors, just oil slicks and silence. The men aboard lived with ghosts. Some days they heard cries from the water, sailors who never made it to the lifeboats. Other days they sailed through wreckage fields, floating cargo, burned bodies, broken wood. There were no good choices, only faster ones. The convoys moved like cities. They stretched for miles. One mistake, one ship breaking formation, and the whole system fell apart. That's what U-boats waited for. A ship out of line, a gap in the escort screen, a moment of doubt, and then impact. By May 1943, the Allies struck back. They began to win, not just battles, but momentum. They sank 41 U-boats that month alone. Crews celebrated quietly. They knew it wasn't over. Inside a U-boat, the world was smaller, cramped, hot, stale air. No light, no sound, except the creak of pressure and the hum of machinery. Every hour spent underwater drained morale. Many U-boat sailors never saw daylight during entire patrols, and when depth charges hit, the walls groaned, the lights flickered, and the fear was physical. One survivor said, "We didn't breathe, we waited to be crushed." But they kept going. Many U-boat men were only 19, 20 years old. They believed in their mission, until the ocean took them. By the end of the war, over 30,000 German submariners were dead. More than 75% casualty rate, the highest of any branch in the German military. And yet, the Allied sailors knew they were not monsters. They were men, just like them. One final encounter, Convoy ONS-5, a brutal clash in the icy North Atlantic. Escorts and U-boats fought for days. The sea turned red. Smoke hung in the air. Snow mixed with ash. When it was over, 6 Allied ships gone, but 7 U-boats were sunk. It was a turning point. The wolf pack had been broken. Admiral Dönitz pulled his boats back. Regroup, regret, reconsider. The war in the Atlantic was shifting, and the Allies were now in control. The convoys kept coming, thousands of ships, millions of tons of cargo, the arteries of victory. Without them, there would be no D-Day, no liberation, no Europe. One British commander sent this message to London: "They are gone, we remain. Convoy safe." They never asked for thanks. They just held the line. The men on the Greyhounds, American, British, Canadian, slept in wet clothes, ate cold rations, stood watch in storms. They buried friends at sea, fought through fatigue, and stayed sharp when failure meant the end. History may not remember their names, but we remember their silence, their resolve, their war without glory. They were the shield, they were the edge, they were the calm between torpedoes, they were the ones who never flinched. Educational documentary disclaimer: this video is for educational purposes, examining historical events. It does not promote any ideology or propaganda. June 6, 1944, just before dawn. The cold waters of the English Channel are churning with thousands of Allied ships, all pointed at the coast of Normandy, France. Crammed aboard are tens of thousands of young Allied soldiers, most of them American, bracing themselves for battle. Many are seasick from the rough overnight voyage. All of them are anxious about what awaits. As the first faint light of morning breaks, they have no idea that they're about to step into hell on earth. But this is D-Day, the long-awaited invasion of Nazi-occupied Europe, and there's no turning back now. For nearly 5 years, World War II has raged across the globe. By 1943 to 44, Nazi Germany is being squeezed from 3 sides: from the east by the Soviet Union's Red Army, from the south by Allied advances through Italy, and now from the west by American and British forces massing in Britain. The Western Allies, including the United States, have been planning a massive return to continental Europe, a second front to relieve pressure on the Soviets and help bring down Hitler's regime. Top American commanders like General Dwight D. Eisenhower know that a direct attack on Hitler's Fortress Europe is as risky as it is necessary. If it succeeds, it could help end the war. If it fails, the war and the suffering will grind on. By late 1943, the strategy is set: an invasion of Normandy on the north coast of France, codenamed Operation Overlord. Eisenhower is appointed Supreme Allied Commander to lead the assault, overseeing a coalition of American, British, Canadian, and other Allied forces. Months of careful preparation follow. Allied engineers and planners study Normandy's beaches, tides, and German defenses in painstaking detail. Huge training camps in England mimic the French terrain so soldiers can rehearse the attack. Secrecy is paramount. The Nazis know an invasion is coming, but they don't know where or when. To deceive the enemy, the Allies create an elaborate ruse, Operation Fortitude, to make the Germans believe the landing will happen at Pas de Calais, the narrowest point of the English Channel, rather than Normandy. Fake armies are positioned in southeast England. Inflatable tanks, wooden aircraft, and bogus radio chatter all sell the illusion of a massive force ready to strike at Calais. American General George S. Patton, a commander the Germans respect and fear, is even put in charge of this phantom 1st U.S. Army Group as bait. The hope is that Hitler will keep his best divisions waiting in the wrong place. The deception works. In the spring of 1944, Nazi leader Adolf Hitler and his high command remain convinced that Normandy is a diversion, expecting the real invasion at Calais later. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the German commander in charge of coastal defenses in France, tries to prepare Normandy as best he can, laying millions of mines, anti-tank obstacles, and fortifications along the shore known as the Atlantic Wall. But even Rommel believes the Allies won't dare attack in bad weather. In early June, a severe storm lashes the Channel, and many German officers take it as a sign no invasion will happen for a while. Rommel himself even leaves France to visit his wife in Germany for her birthday, thinking nothing big will happen in his absence. He was wrong. On June 5, 1944, a brief break in the weather is spotted by Allied meteorologists. A narrow 24-hour window of calmer seas and clearer skies. General Eisenhower makes the gut-wrenching decision to launch the invasion in the early hours of June 6th. "Okay, let's go," he says, committing over 150,000 men to the most ambitious amphibious assault in history. That night, the Allied invasion fleet, nearly 7,000 ships and landing craft, set sail across the dark Channel waters. It is an armada like the world has never seen. On board, the troops scribble last letters home, check their weapons, and steel themselves for battle. Many try to calm their nerves with jokes or prayers. Some have never seen combat before. A few are veterans of North Africa or Italy, knowing this will be even tougher. In the pre-dawn darkness, as rain falls and waves toss their boats, some men quietly reflect that they might not live to see another sunrise. Just after midnight on June 6th, the first blows of D-Day fall. Thousands of American, British, and Canadian paratroopers leap from airplanes into the darkness over Normandy. It's a daring plan to seize key bridges and roadways inland, to slow German counterattacks against the beaches. As American soldiers saw it, the night sky suddenly filled with parachutes. Paratrooper Eugene Rowe of the 101st Airborne later recalled stepping out of the plane into a chaotic mix of tracer bullets and flak, lighting up the sky. The drops do not go smoothly. Planes fly off course or come under fire, and paratroopers are scattered all over the Norman countryside. Many units miss their landing zones. Some paratroopers drown in flooded fields. Others end up miles from their targets. And yet, amid the confusion, these airborne troops wreak havoc behind enemy lines. Small groups of paratroopers rally to capture vital bridges, silence a few German gun batteries, and confuse the enemy. A band of British glider troops famously takes the crucial Pegasus Bridge in a midnight assault, and American paratroopers fight skirmishes in the dark, helping secure the inland side of the invasion area. The Germans are bewildered. Reports of enemy troops all over Normandy in the middle of the night sow confusion in their ranks. Around 5:30 a.m., as dawn finally arrives, the Allied naval bombardment begins in earnest. Dozens of battleships, cruisers, and destroyers lying off the coast open fire, unleashing a thunderous barrage on the German coastal fortifications. The sky turns orange with flashes of big guns. On the beaches of Normandy, German soldiers from Hitler's entrenched divisions huddle in their bunkers as shells pound their concrete walls. One German defender wrote that the bombardment was deafening, a ceaseless thunder that shook the earth and made it seem as if the end of the world was coming. For the Allied troops packed in landing craft heading toward the beaches, the naval gunfire is both terrifying and reassuring, a signal that the final moment is at hand. Many soldiers recall the whistles of boatswains and officers barking last-minute orders over the din of explosions. In their landing craft, face paint streaked and helmet snug, they check their rifles one more time, their heart pounding. Some make the sign of the cross. Others are lost in their thoughts. At 6:30 a.m., the first landing craft hit the beaches. The invasion zone is divided into 5 code-named beaches stretching along the Normandy coast. From west to east, Utah and Omaha beaches, assaulted by American forces, Gold and Sword beaches, attacked by the British, and Juno Beach, taken by the Canadians. Each beach has its own challenges and risks, but Omaha Beach will prove the bloodiest of all. As the front ramps of the American landing boats drop at Omaha, they reveal a scene of sheer terror. The Germans, members of the battle-hardened 352nd Infantry Division, have their machine guns, mortars, and artillery zeroed in. A storm of bullets and shells immediately rakes the incoming Americans. Soldiers are cut down before they even leave the boats. Men stumble into chest-deep water under heavy fire, struggling forward under the weight of waterlogged packs and gear. Within minutes, the shoreline is chaos. Corpses floating in the surf, blood coloring the waves red, wounded men crying for medics while bullets whip overhead. One American survivor later described Omaha Beach that morning as a bloody mess of wet sand and broken bodies. The entire shore was littered with the fallen, and those still alive had to crawl over their comrades using any scrap of cover they could find. A beach obstacle, a destroyed vehicle, a patch of shingle, to escape the German fire. The noise is deafening. Non-stop rifle and machine gun fire, mortar shells exploding, landing craft engines roaring, men shouting and screaming. Many American soldiers feel paralyzed by fear as the air buzzes with enemy bullets. Some units are virtually wiped out within minutes of landing. Company A of the 116th Infantry, for instance, hits the beach with over 180 men. Within half an hour, only a few dozen are still able to fight. It's little wonder that later, veterans would call this killing ground Bloody Omaha. For those Americans pinned down on that beach, D-Day truly felt like doomsday. And yet amid this hell on the shore, acts of bravery and determination begin to turn the tide. Small groups of soldiers, often led by junior officers or sergeants after many leaders are lost, start to push forward. They breach the barbed wire and mines under punishing fire. Army Rangers scale the nearby cliffs at Pointe du Hoc to take out a battery of big guns, only to find the guns had been moved. A nasty surprise, though the Rangers eventually locate and destroy them inland. Engineers risk their lives to blast through sea walls and clear pathways off the beach. Bit by bit, American GIs find gaps in the German defenses. A few tanks manage to make it ashore in later waves. Most of the amphibious swimming tanks launched at sea sank in the rough water, leaving the first infantry waves without armored support. By late morning, against all odds, survivors at Omaha Beach begin to climb the bluffs and overrun the German positions from the flank. The price is ghastly. Omaha alone will see over 2,000 American casualties. But slowly, the German fire slacks as Allied troops gain ground. Meanwhile, to the west at Utah Beach, the other American landing has gone more smoothly. Strong currents pushed the first wave off course, causing them to land in a slightly less defended sector of Utah. This stroke of luck, combined with aggressive leadership, means casualties at Utah are relatively light. Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt Jr., the eldest son of former U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt, famously walks the beach with a cane, organizing troops amid the chaos. Realizing they've landed in the wrong spot, Roosevelt smiles and says, "We'll start the war from right here," improvising a new plan on the fly. His calm courage helps the men at Utah press inland with fewer than 300 casualties, a far cry from the carnage of Omaha. On the British and Canadian beaches, Gold, Juno, and Sword, the Allies also meet fierce resistance, but they benefit from better preliminary bombardment and specialized tanks that help clear obstacles. The fighting there is still deadly. The Canadian 3rd Division at Juno, for instance, sustains heavy losses in the first hour. But by midday, the Commonwealth troops have largely secured their beachheads. They begin moving inland, though they face counterattacks and heavily defended villages just beyond the sand. Stiff German resistance at a seaside town called Ouistreham and other strong points slows the British on Sword, preventing them from capturing the city of Caen on D-Day as planned. Still, the British and Canadians push off the beaches and start linking up their landing zones. Crucially, the beachheads are holding. For the German defenders, initial confusion turns to panic as the scale of the invasion becomes clear. In Berlin, Hitler's inner circle is stunned that the Allies chose Normandy. Hitler himself had slept in on D-Day morning, exhausted from a long night and under the influence of sleeping medication. His generals were so afraid to wake him that critical hours were lost while the Führer snoozed, unaware that an invasion was in full swing. By the time Hitler finally learned of the Normandy landings late in the morning, he stubbornly clung to the belief that this was not the main assault. Convinced the real attack would still come at Calais, Hitler refused to release vital panzer tank divisions to counterattack in Normandy. Field Marshal Rommel's requests for armor to drive the Allies back into the sea were delayed by bureaucracy and Hitler's disbelief. German reinforcements that could have possibly crushed the vulnerable beachheads never arrived in time. This hesitation proved fatal to the German defense. As one German officer bitterly put it later, "The invasion succeeded because our highest command dithered while the enemy acted." By the evening of June 6, 1944, the impossible had happened. The Allies had established a foothold in France. It wasn't tidy or according to plan. The advance inland was slower than hoped, and some key D-Day objectives were still not taken, but the beachheads were secure. Over 150,000 Allied troops had come ashore by the end of D-Day, including Americans, British, Canadians, and troops from France and other nations. The human cost was staggering. On D-Day alone, more than 10,000 Allied soldiers were killed, wounded, or missing. Of those, an estimated 4,000 or more were dead. American cemeteries would later dot the bluffs above Omaha Beach, filled with row upon row of white crosses marking the sons who never came home. German casualties, too, numbered in the thousands, though exact figures remain uncertain. French civilians caught in the crossfire also suffered terribly on that longest day. The beaches, codenamed Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword, had been transformed from quiet peacetime vacation sands into scorched battlegrounds littered with wreckage and sacrifice. D-Day was a turning point. The hellish fighting on those Norman shores marked the beginning of the end of World War II in Europe. As American soldiers saw it, they had cracked open Hitler's fortress Europe. The Western Allies now had a toehold on the continent, and they would pour in reinforcements in the coming days and weeks. Ahead lay months of brutal combat in Normandy's hedgerows and French towns, and nearly a year of hard fighting to reach Berlin. But the success of D-Day meant that victory was only a matter of time. One weary GI, trudging through the sand on the night of June 6th, supposedly remarked, "Well, I made it off the beach. I guess I'm going to live through this war after all." For the veterans of Normandy, and for the world, D-Day would be remembered as the day when the tide turned against the Nazis. The price was high, the bloodshed unimaginable, but the mission was accomplished. The Allies had come ashore in France. The liberation of Europe had begun on that longest day in fire and blood, truly hell on the shore, but the dawn of freedom on the horizon.